Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about MMA news. Just like the beginning of this podcast, there's a lot of MMA news coming out with a bunch of the fighters going on the different podcast platforms and talking about their upcoming fights and what generally is upcoming for them. I thought it'd be really interesting, and I really wanted to get into a bunch of this news. So, because of all the influx of information that we have, I thought I would bring out my friend and very knowledgeable MMA fan. You might have heard of him in previous podcasts that I've had, but I would like to introduce everybody to Mass. Mass, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, it's great to be back once again tonight.
Yeah, and we have gone into fights before in the past. We've talked about it on the podcast, so please go check out those podcasts. But like I said, we got so much news that came out. We got Max Holloway coming out, talking on the Joe Rogan podcast. We have Cody Garbrandt news. We have a new championship fight between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, which is going to be a rematch, which is going to be a fun fight. We got Belal Muhammad and Leon Edwards. I really wanted to get into that and what an opportunity that is for Belal Muhammad. We also want to talk about the heavyweight lineup. And speaking of the heavyweight lineup, our previous podcast was a show about the fight night card between Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Ciryl Gane. We just finished watching that fight. It may have happened maybe 10 minutes ago. And I just wanted to start off this podcast talking about this fight because it's fresh. We went into this fight thinking that it would be a striking exchange, and that was true, but it looked like, especially Rozenstruik, was very hesitant coming into this fight. We saw Ciryl Gane staying on the outside, popping him with jabs, which is the same game plan that Alistair Overeem used against Rozenstruik. Unfortunately, Alistair Overeem felt the power of Biggie Boy and got knocked out in the last round. But Ciryl Gane got it done. But in my opinion, it wasn't that eventful of a fight. At the end, in the post-fight meeting or interview that he had, he talked about fighting someone for the belt at heavyweight. And he also talked about some contenders, and John Jones came up. I think that's way outside of where Ciryl Gane is going to be. But I wanted to see and I wanted to hear what Mass had to say about this. Mass, let me know. You watched this fight. I mean, it didn't live up to what we thought it was going to be. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It didn't live up to meet our expectations, especially with the last podcast that I was on. Going in, our energies were super high and we were talking about like what we expected. But, we could clearly tell that the exchange was very slow. Like you said, Ciryl Gane, he kept on with his jabs on the outside. And Rozenstruik kind of like shelled up, and he was very hesitant with going forward. And I was very confused. I was very excited earlier, but it is what it is. I'm just ready to see what Ciryl Gane wants to do next. With his call outs at the end, especially with what's going on with the heavyweight division. There's a lot of influx, and there's a lot of mix and matches that can happen.
Yeah, I think what honestly happened in this fight is what's happened in heavyweight fights in the past. We've seen it before. We talked about it in the pre-fight show, and I was hoping this wouldn't happen, but you see this in heavyweight sometimes, and maybe in the lower weight divisions. But when you have a powerful striker like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and for him to get stopped in some of his last fights, I think he gets a little gun shy. he wants to use his power. He wants to get the guy out there. Every heavyweight wants to do that. But it just looked like he wasn't pulling the trigger. I mean, what do you think? Like, I think it was just him being hesitant and him being stopped a couple times. I think Francis Ngannou is the exception when it comes to this. And what I mean by that, he did get stopped by Stipe Miocic and then did have that all-time low output in that Derek Lewis fight. But Francis Ngannou popped back and he came back. But it just looked like Jairzinho Rozenstruik just didn't want to throw. Like, what do you think? Why do you think he didn't want to? Like, I don't get it. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, look, here's the thing. We don't want to discredit Rozenstruik. Look, he's got all his arsenal. He's got a lot of tools under his belt, and he has it, right? We're not discrediting him, but he tonight he didn't show his arsenal. He didn't use any of his tools. He was very, very hesitant, and I feel like things just kind of got to him. Honestly, simply that's what happened, because he's up there, and he's, of course, right now he was ranked number 4. Now he's now number 5, but he's up there for a reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was just gun shy. He didn't use the tool. Yeah, I agree with you. He didn't use the tools that he had. And it's easy for us to just sit here and just talk about this right after the fight, especially it just happened a little while ago. So it's easy for us to just sit here and just be like, "Oh, why didn't he just knock him out?" And that's kind of the people that just come into the sport and they just watch it right at the beginning, and maybe this is their first fight that they watched. And you know what? This reminds me of a time when Stylebender and Yoel Romero were fighting. I convinced everybody, it's like, this fight cannot end by judge's decision. This has got to be a knockout. Stylebender is going to do something. Yoel Romero's got to knock Stylebender out, and then we got that fight. I mean, this always happens. I feel like when a fight is anticipated, not that this fight was the biggest fight, not this was some sort of Conor McGregor versus Khabib fight. But at the end of the day, you just got to throw. Like, you can't. And when I watched this fight, I noticed that Ciryl Gane was, Jairzinho Rozenstruik was really talking about getting kick low. He was talking about getting eye poked and all this kind of stuff, and he wasn't paying attention to the fight. Mass, what do you think about this? Like, I mean, he just didn't look like he was into it. Like, whenever I see a fighter walk into a fight and he's more concerned about the referee than he is about his opponent, that makes me nervous as a watcher. What do you think? I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, sometimes when emotions are high during fights like this, at like a very high level that MMA is, sometimes emotions get the best of the fighters, and I don't blame them, right? Especially now during COVID, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of protocols these guys got to follow in order to put on a fight for us. But yeah, like I said, when emotions are high, sometimes, these fighters let their emotions get the best of them. And we've seen that, especially with like what happened with Yoel and Adesanya. The outcome was something that we did not expect. And
Yeah.
I feel like the thing that I can relate between this fight and that fight was the emotions, right? Going in, and like you said, Rozenstruik was talking about his game plan and his leg kicks, but his emotions got the best of him, and we could definitely tell tonight.
I think when you get that moniker of knockout artist, it puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders. I think I keep him bringing this up, but Francis Ngannou felt it. Derek Lewis felt it at some point. When you get that moniker of knockout artist, it puts a lot of pressure on you to finish the fight. Now, this brings us to the next topic, which is, what is the heavyweight division going to look like? Mass, what do you think is next for these fighters, and what do you think is next for the heavyweight division at its whole?
That's a good question. That's a question that I don't really have a direct answer to. But look, there's so much going on with the heavyweight division. There's so many different options. It kind of reminds me of the lightweight division. Now we have Francis and Stipe that are going to fight soon. In terms of that, depending on the outcome, we have Jones going up. We got Derek Lewis, who just won his last fight. Honestly, there's so many different options that we can mix and match. I feel like there's not one right option. There's like so many different options right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options, like you said. There's a lot of ways that we could play around with this. I think that the way that Dana White has alluded to is that obviously Francis and Stipe are going to have their rematch. It's going to be really interesting. We don't really know what's going to happen in that fight. I can't tell you right now, sitting here, I can't say that Stipe Miocic is going to win that fight again. I think Joe Rogan brought up a really good point, and he's reiterated this a couple times on his podcast. But when he fought Daniel Cormier and got knocked out in their first fight, we don't know if that was due to the lingering effects of fighting Francis Ngannou. We don't know all the devastating punches that he took from Francis Ngannou, because in that fight that Stipe had with Francis Ngannou, a lot of people can say, oh, he evaded the shots of Francis, but he took some heavy ones. He took some heavy shots from the hardest hitting fighter in the UFC right now. I think Derek Lewis might have something to say about that because he's got that Knockout King tattoo on his chest. But like I said, let's go back to what Dana White was saying. He wants to see Stipe Francis fight. And now he's saying that John Jones is going to be the one that fights for the belt after this fight. And this is no matter the outcome. I don't think Stipe could ask for a rematch. This is the second time he's going to ask for a rematch if he does lose. So John Jones fights for the belt next. And then I think that Derek Lewis could fight Ciryl Gane. I mean, we got to find someone for Derek Lewis after that. Maybe he could wait a little bit longer to fight for the belt. I don't know. What do you think? Who do you think Derek Lewis could fight next? I'm trying to grasp a name, because in the pre-fight show, we talked about Ciryl Gane or Jairzinho Rozenstruik fighting Derek Lewis. But who do you see Derek Lewis fighting?
I honestly think we should give these guys a little bit of time. And to me, I feel like we should, have Lewis and Rozenstruik go at it next. That makes the most sense to me.
So you're saying, yeah. So you're saying Ciryl Gane and Derek Lewis fight next.
Yeah. Pardon me. Sorry, I said Rozenstruik. Yeah, Ciryl Gane versus Lewis. Yeah.
I get what you mean. And so, I mean, that fight would be good, but it's just it's kind of sad that this fight ended the way that it did. And I'm speaking about the Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Ciryl Gane fight. I think that the UFC expected this one to be a banger, and for it to end by unanimous decision and Ciryl Gane comes out the winner. I mean, it's kind of, I think it breaks the UFC's plan on what they originally had. What do you think? You think that this was the plan that the UFC had to make Ciryl Gane or Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight Derek Lewis?
I think, to be honest, no, because Lewis fight was still pretty new. Happened like about a week ago now. Honestly, what I want to say is, with the heavyweight, I've noticed that it's very hard to depict and predict, the outcome of certain fights. Like you were mentioning earlier with Francis and Stipe, it's just so hard to make a prediction right now, especially with a really high caliber fighter like Francis with the power he has. You never know, right? Things can go either way, left or right. And that's what I love about the heavyweight division. And especially now, since there's a lot of mixing and matching going on with Jones coming up, I'm honestly very excited for this. And I can't wait to see what this division holds.
So another division that is up for a lot of debate and a lot of crazy things are going on in it is the 155-pound division. Now, we see that Khabib Nurmagomedov is almost 100% against coming back. I made a podcast before where I talked about Khabib Nurmagomedov's soccer career and how he wants to become a soccer star. Um, but that brings me to our next topic, which is it seems like Dustin and Conor are going to have their third fight. It seems like it's going to happen. And is this the right fight to make? What do you think, Mass?
As of now, I feel like right now, yeah, I think there should be a rematch, but not right away. And of course, when I say right away, I mean, you know, I'd say give it like less than a year, right? Of course, enough time for a really good training camp for both of them. But I feel like Connor has a lot more. He has a lot more to do. He's got to go back to the drawing board and fix up a couple things. As we saw, he looked very different. His entire stance was very boxing oriented. And you can see off Connor's social media as well. He's been posting, there's no more nice Connor. I'm going back to the old Connor. And actually, right, I think 2 days after the Poirier fight, Connor uploaded a video of him, throwing some Muay Thai kicks, and he had like a pole set up, and it was pretty nice to see that, right? We've seen Connor in the past, after any sort of losses he's had, he's come back stronger. He's come back way, way stronger. And I feel like if we give him the chance, we can see something crazy, right? He's still pretty young, and he's got some time.
Yeah, I think there's two camps when it comes to this. There's one camp that came out and has talked about Charles Oliveira fighting for the belt. He's done some amazing stuff, but I think a lot of people got convinced after the Tony Ferguson fight where Oliveira wrapped up the boogeyman in Tony Ferguson the way that he did. I think a lot of people got convinced that that's the fight to make. He should be the next one to fight for the belt. So that's more of the purist view. A lot of people want to see him fight for the belt against Dustin. Some people have also talked about Michael Chandler fighting Dustin. And I like that fight. That's a fun fight. But it seems like this Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier fight is going to happen. No matter what camp you fall into, it seems like this is just what the UFC wants. Now, how do I see this fight playing out? There's a couple ways that I could see it. Conor McGregor could come out and start talking a whole lot of smack again. And you're going to say to me right now, hey, Naz, like, why are you bringing this up? That's not a very good tactic. Why are you bringing this up? Dustin Poirier just had a podcast with Joe Rogan. He actually admitted in that podcast that he felt the effects of Conor McGregor's trash talk. Now, that might play a small portion into it, but it might also give Conor the boost and confidence that he needs. Now, do I think that the fight is going to play out any different? We got to see how Conor McGregor addresses the leg kicks. Now, a lot of people have brought up the fact of the switch in kind of styles that Conor McGregor has had. I've talked about this in previous podcasts, but I believe that's just due to the fact that he's facing a left-handed fighter. We've seen in past fights like the Eddie Alvarez fight between Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez, where he had that more hopping karate style, using a lot more of his leg kicks and whatnot. But I don't think that the Conor McGregor that we saw against Dustin Poirier was a complete diversion of who we know Conor McGregor to be. I also think that if we do see Conor McGregor sustain that hopping karate style against Dustin Poirier, he's still he can still get affected by those leg kicks. It's not like you switch that kind of stance. He's so heavy, like his feet are so heavy. and they're planted so hard. So it's going to be very tough to game plan around Dustin Poirier's lower calf kick. Like, what do you think, Mass? What do you think the game plan should be for Conor McGregor if he fights him next?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we should take into account here. Number one, we need to make sure that Conor continues to feed off some sort of motivation, right? Everyone's talked about this with the money Conor's making. It's hard to sometimes find motivation to do what these MMA guys do, right? Putting your lives at risk, for these paychecks that don't really matter for Conor, right? He's got his whiskey and all that. But yeah, motivation. And number two, we need him to go back to that wide, Muay Thai karate stance, like the old Conor in the featherweight division. There's that. And, like you said in the Joe Rogan podcast earlier, Dustin did admit to that, which was pretty crazy to me. I didn't expect him to admit something like that because, like you said, going into a third fight, Conor could probably use that to his advantage, which he may, and that'll for sure play a major role, right? Because if you think about it, you look back to the Aldo fight, the first Dustin Poirier fight, the Eddie Alvarez fight, Chad Mendes as well. When Conor goes all in with the trash talking, he always gets in the fighter's head, always getting into his opponent's head. And we've seen it. We've seen it in front of our eyes. Now the question is he going to do it again? And how is it going to affect Dustin this time, now that he's experienced, the nice guy, the nice Conor?
Yeah, it's funny because he said, and I'm quoting Dustin Poirier here, that it was actually a lovely occasion almost. It was a lot easier for Conor, but Dustin Poirier to come in there and fight. You talked about this when we were talking about the Ciryl Gane and Rozenstruik fight, but there's a lot of factors that fighters are going through right now due to COVID. And it's all about flying to Abu Dhabi Fight Island. It could be flying to Las Vegas and being stuck in quarantine. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, not having the fans. Some fighters enjoy not having the fans. Some fighters don't really like it. And there's a lot of factors that are playing into these fighters' minds at the moment. And when Dustin Poirier said on the Joe Rogan podcast that because Conor McGregor wasn't talking trash, it was just another thing that he had to forget about. Because Dustin Poirier is one of those fighters that enjoys fighting without the fans. And then he also enjoys it when the person doesn't talk trash. Now, Dustin Poirier also invited the fact that Conor could come into this third fight and talk a whole bunch of trash. So it seems like Dustin Poirier is ready for that kind of trash talk. I would also like to say that Dustin Poirier is an evolved fighter. He's not the same fighter that fought Conor McGregor all those years ago. He's evolved now. He's a man. At the time, he was a kid. And he wasn't mature enough, I feel like, to handle someone talking that much trash. In the Joe Rogan podcast, they also talked about how Conor McGregor affected Jose Aldo and how much Conor went after him. It was so funny because I watched a compilation clip of the world tour that Conor and Jose Aldo went on. And you could see how much of a factor the trash talking was. Now, I don't want to sit here and act like a casual and say that the trash talking was, it's all you need to do. But I think the trash talking is the base layer, and it makes Conor that aggressive fighter that we all know him to be. In my opinion, Conor McGregor in his prime was the greatest one-round UFC fighter that we've ever seen. And I think that was just due to the aggressive nature that he showed. And I think that all starts with the trash talking. But like I said again, like what do you think? How do you think he's gonna fix the leg kick situation? Like I really think that because Conor McGregor doesn't switch stances, Joe Rogan talked about this as well. We've seen an influx of fighters come in and switch stances. They go from orthodox to southpaw. But Conor doesn't really do that. He stays southpaw. So I'm not saying Conor McGregor go in there and switch stances, but I think Conor should hop in and out, be very active. It was just a split second mistake that he made to get caught by Dustin Poirier's punch. What do you think, Mass? Like, do you agree with what I'm saying? Like, I think he's just got to be a lot more active in and out. And the leg kick thing is, even if you check those leg kicks, it's still affecting you. And I think a lot of people are forgetting this, but it's still affecting Dustin Poirier. But I think you just got to be a lot more active and hop in and out of range. But what do you think, Mass?
Well, I can definitely agree with that. I feel like in order for Conor to make a change, it's in order to make the shift, he doesn't have to do much, right? Because Conor, he's been that agile, versatile fighter at featherweight as well, where he can hop back and forth, like you're saying. He just needs to figure out what he's going to do with this squared in boxing stance, right? There's been a lot of pictures that we've seen that have been compared. So it's been the Dustin Poirier Conor 2 fight, and then a picture of Conor and Dustin their first fight, and Conor's stance is a major difference. So I don't think if he gets to work, he can for sure figure something out for those leg kicks. And you know what? Going back to what you were saying earlier, I actually completely forgot about the Jose Aldo fight and how that affected Jose Aldo, how Conor got in his head. And, you know, Dustin was saying on the podcast earlier, Joe Rogan podcast, he was talking about how, it's not about, Conor's trash talk getting personal, but it's more about how, when there's someone barking in your face, you got to think about that when you're stepping into the octagon. And when Conor is not doing that, that's one less thing that you got to worry about, right? And also, I feel like, if they do head into a third fight, I think Dustin, he has the confidence to feed off of the second fight that he had. He has confidence from there. And like you mentioned earlier, he's very evolved, right? He was a kid. He was a kid during his first fight. Both Conor and Dustin, they've come a long, long way, and they have a long way to go as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple key things that I want to point out as well. Is I think we're both in agreement that the stance thing is one thing, but it depends on who he is fighting. I know a lot of those photos have come out and said that, hey, look at this. I think it's just the activity level. It's just that Conor McGregor was a lot more active, hopping in and out of range. And also what Conor McGregor said at the end of the fight was, hey, hey guys, I got to get in here. I have to get more time in this octagon. At the time, he didn't fight for that long. Like if we look at his record right here, he fought Donald Cerrone at the beginning of 2020. Then he fought Dustin Poirier in 2021, January 24th. So he wasn't that active. We've known Conor to be so active. Like, let's just take a look at this. He fought Jose Aldo December 2015. My God, 2015. That's a long time ago. But anyways, he fought Jose Aldo in 2015. Before that, he fought Chad Mendes July 11th, 2015. Right before that, he fought Dennis Seaver and TKO'd him 2015, January 18th. And then before that fight, we saw him knock out TKO finish Dustin Poirier in 2014. And we can see it then as well. We saw him face Diego Brandao in 2014. Then we saw him face Max Holloway in 2013. So what I'm trying to say here is the activity level that Conor McGregor showed at that time, right before the Jose Aldo fight, was just incredible. The guy was just fighting all the time. This is the type of guy that needs a lot of activity. Now, a lot of people are brought up Conor McGregor showing up in a boat. Joe Rogan and Dustin Poirier also talked about it as well, showing up in that mega yacht and saying that Conor McGregor, there's no way that he could have the same drive as he once was. What do you think about that, Mass? And how do you think that the financial thing has played into Conor McGregor?
I was going to bring that up. It's good that you brought that up. Look, here's the thing. I'm a big Conor fan. I grew up watching Conor. I'm still a big fan of Conor's, but listen, things change, right? Fighters get older. Here's the thing. This is how I put it. Look, we're talking about how Conor hasn't been active, his inactivity. And what's the cause of his inactivity, right? The cause is that he has a lot more money, right? And that's not a direct, that doesn't have a direct correlation. But what has a correlation is the money and passion, right? When Conor was very active, he had an immense amount of passion. And the reason for that was that, he had, his life wasn't ahead of him. He had a lot to work towards. And now that he's finally worked towards that, it's all paying off in front of his eyes. And I don't want to be that typical person that says, you know what, Conor has a lot of money. Now he can't do this. He can definitely do anything. He's proven that. But at this point, it's like he's kind of at a crossroads, I feel like, right? Where he's confused, right? He has a lot going on in his life. And like I just mentioned, he's at a crossroads. So I'm really curious as to what he does next, if there's going to be a third fight and how he's going to change things up, how his training camp's going to look. Is he always going to be active, right? Even back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I mean like 4 or 5 years ago, even when Conor didn't have a fight scheduled, he was always training. But now, as we've seen with, after the Mayweather fight, coming back from Khabib, when he started training for Cowboy, after that, after he won that fight, he wasn't active, right? He only started getting active when the Dustin Poirier fight came alive. And
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points right there. It's just the crossroads that Conor McGregor is at right now. It's a really good point that you brought up, and I think it's not just a crossroads, but I think it's a big opportunity, and just because of the name value that Conor McGregor has, and I think that goes into it as well. I was going to bring that up, but it's not like Conor McGregor didn't want to fight. It's just his name value was up there with the sport elite. We're talking about this guy being in the same class as LeBron James, all these high class soccer players and hockey players and all these major athletes. This guy was up there, and he was fighting Floyd Mayweather, like you mentioned. His just name value was so important to the UFC. I think that's why the UFC was a little bit hesitant to have him fight as often as he once did. Now, this brings me to our next topic, and it's something that I really wanted to talk about. Funny enough, I made a podcast about this whole card and all this kind of stuff, and it actually got ruined, but now it's been being survived. And what I'm talking about is Belal Muhammad is going to be fighting Leon Edwards. I think that this is going to be super fun fight. It's a great opportunity for Belal Muhammad, and the ranking jump that he's going to be on, and just to get Leon Edwards active is a great thing as well. The last time that we saw this guy was in 2019, where he fought RDA, and before that he fought Gunnar Nelson, who me and Mass both respect. We know that Gunny has a lot of amazing jiu-jitsu skills. He fought Donald Cerrone, and he beat him by unanimous decision in 2018. And the list goes on. We got Vicente Luque on there. And then we also have Kamaru Usman, which was his last loss. So when we bring up Leon Edwards here, we're not talking about some chump, but we have to see where he's at. And I think Belal Muhammad stepping up after Khamzat Chimaev got lingering effects from COVID is a real test. And for him, and I'm talking about Belal Muhammad, but I think it's a real rocky kind of moment, is if Belal Muhammad can beat Leon Edwards, that jumps him up in the rankings like crazy. Mas, what do you think about this? I think this is a fun fight, and it's fun for either side. If you're a Leon Edwards fan, you're like, okay, I finally get to see this guy fight again. If you're a Belal Muhammad fan, you're like, oh my God, like if this guy wins this fight, he jumps up in the rankings like crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Here's the thing: we were talking about this earlier, and how Leon Edwards hasn't been active for the past year. In fact, I know that Belal Muhammad has been in 3 UFC fights ever since Edwards and RDA fought, and I'm very curious to see how this all plays out and how Edwards performs. And like you mentioned, that Belal Muhammad, he can leverage this to his advantage on a very high scale, fighting against a major name like Edwards. We know Belal Muhammad, he's got his grappling, striking, he's very accurate with his striking. And I can't wait to see how this all turns out.
Yeah, I think that Belal Muhammad is going into this fight as somewhat of an unknown, but to the hardcore fans, we all know him from his fighting. His last fight was against Diego Lima, who is brothers, and he's part of the Lima family. So we all know Diego Lima to be a high level competition, and he beat him by unanimous decision. And we also know him from his podcast, which is great. I would go check that out. Belal Muhammad's podcast is amazing. But the reason I wanted to bring this up was I think, first of all, kudos to Belal Muhammad to take a short notice fight like this. The last time he fought was in February 13th, 2021. And now he's going to be fighting sometime in March. So that's a very short turnaround for him. Now, the next topic I wanted to bring up, and it's something very close to Mass's heart. Mass is a giant Cody Garbrandt fan, and who isn't a Cody Garbrandt fan at the end of the day? I'm a massive fan of his as well. I'm not just going to put Mass in that camp. I'm going to join it too. But there's been a bunch of Cody Garbrandt news come out, and Mass, what do you think? What do you think is next for Cody Garbrandt? And how do you see him playing in that bantamweight division? Or maybe he could go to that 125-pound division. Go ahead.
Good question. I think we got a lot to talk about right over here in this specific division. And Cody, I think we should start out and talk about how Cody got hit by COVID. And when I say he got hit very hard with the variant. Earlier this year, he was having a lot of different issues. He was training and he was having problems with vertigo, and Dana got involved. Dana got his doctors involved. They had some major doctors from Mayo Clinic. And, Cody, he got hit by COVID and he lost a ton of weight. He had some major symptoms, and he was still training here and there. And I think when Cody got tested positive for COVID, it was right before he was going to Mike Tyson's Tyson Ranch. Cody was talking about how he was filming a documentary, and Mike Tyson was going to be part of that documentary. And Cody had to get tested before going to Tyson Ranch to film. And that's where he found out that he got tested positive. And then after that, a couple months later, Cody got back to training, and he had problems again. And he was talking about how he had problems with his arm, and apparently found out that he had 3 blood clots, and he had to go on blood thinner after that. He had some sort of superficial vein, and there was some major clots in that. And apparently it had something to do with the effects of COVID. And then also going back, we know that leading up to Cody's last fight, he had some sort of kidney infection. And he was mentioning that he was on antibiotics, 6 different antibiotics, which affected his immune system immensely. And then getting hit by COVID right after that. Cody's had a lot going on, but now he feels very confident in what's next. He feels that he's getting better slowly. And I feel like there's a lot of options right now. There's a lot that can go on. What do you think? What do you think? I mean, there's so much going on in that division from bantamweight and then going down to 125. What do you think about this?
I think that so like you mentioned, there was a lot of issues that Cody Garbrandt had. He's also talked about the amount of biking that he did while he had all those issues. He had those lingering COVID issues. We talked about Khamzat Chimaev, who was supposed to fight Leon Edwards before, and he also had those lingering issues. Man, fighters these days are going through a lot, and I do not pity them at all. So, what do I think is next for Cody Garbrandt? I think Cody's in a really good spot right now. He just got that knockout win over Rafael Assunção, which is amazing below the hip knockout that he got in the second round, right when the round was ending. You remember when the horn went off and Cody knocked him out and he was flat on his face. So I think Cody Garbrandt's in a good spot. He got that knockout win. But unfortunately, I think his idea of going to 125 is not going to happen. He's not going to fight Deiveson Figueiredo, who we're going to talk about later, has his second fight with Brandon Moreno. So I don't think that's an option for him. And I don't think Cody really wants to fight anybody else at 125. The 125 cut, I believe, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more research about this, but I think this is one of the reasons of the kidney failures that you mentioned. So I don't think he really wants to go down to that 125-pound division again. At bantamweight, there's just so many options for him. And we were talking about this before the podcast, but in one of my previous podcasts, I talked about Cody Garbrandt maybe fighting Jose Aldo, or it could be TJ Dillashaw fighting Jose Aldo. What do you think? I really like both of them fighting one of them. I think that if Cody fights Jose Aldo, then we could see TJ fighting someone else, maybe even fighting for the belt after Aljamain and Piotr Jan get at it. But what do you think?
Like you mentioned, there's a lot that can go on here. Also taking into account that, is Cody going to go down, especially with what's gone on with his kidneys and his immune system. Not that I'm a doctor, but I was listening to Cody talking, and he put this out. He's like, this is my hit list for now. And what he wants is he wants Aldo. And in this order, Aldo in April, then he wants Figueiredo after that. And then depending on like where TJ is at the time, maybe getting a couple fights, 2 fights, a fight in, depending on that, going after TJ as well. And Cody was mentioning, he's like, you know what? TJ doesn't deserve to go straight for the title right after this, right? He's going to make up for the suspension and whatnot. And I can definitely see, this going as Cody mentioned, Aldo, Figueiredo, and then TJ later.
Yeah, I mean, I think the TJ fight makes a lot of sense too, now that you bring it up, because, and this maybe could be the comeback fight for both of them, even though TJ is coming off of a long layoff due to taking performance enhancing drugs. I think that this will answer a lot of questions. And honestly, I think that Cody gets another chance because of all the allegations that he has had against TJ Dillashaw about that fight. And when I talk about allegations, I'm mentioning performance enhancing drugs. And I mean, that fight was massive. That fight was massive. Everybody was talking about TJ and Cody Garbrandt going at it. So I feel like that fight that actually makes sense. I mean, if one of them, if they don't want to fight Jose Aldo, they could just go and do that TJ Cody fight again. What do you think about that? How do you think that fight would play out now?
I can definitely see that happening, but going into that, look, actually, let's step back a little. We know that, Cody has matured a lot over the past few years, and he's admittedly, he's continuing to work on it. We know that, he's always had problems with his fights when he let things get to his head, and when he got in, you can sort of say brawls. And now we could tell, especially with his last fight, he's trying to work on that. And a lot of his losses, he's given them away due to things like letting things get to his head. Now, right off the bat, if TJ, comes out of his suspension, 2-year layoff, I think going in to the lead up of that fight, there's going to be a lot of trash talk. Like I mentioned earlier, Cody talked about how TJ just doesn't deserve a fight of a very high caliber right off the bat. He's got to make up for what he's done. Mentioning PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. Honestly, I feel like I want this fight to happen down the road, but not right away. I don't see it happening right away, but for sure, maybe if Cody fights Aldo, I could see happening after that and bypassing Figueiredo. But I can't wait for the TJ Cody fight. I'm definitely going to be here for that. And there's a lot that's playing out during all this.
Yeah, I can't wait for that fight when it happens. I believe that fight needs to happen, even though TJ won two out of those two of those fights. I think we just got to see it again. It's just such a grudge match. It's such a big time fight. And hey, like TJ even says, and I talked about this in one of my past podcasts, but TJ even says that at the age of 35, he feels like he's the best that he's ever felt. Now, what does that mean? I think, he got his double shoulder surgery. That's a big deal. We don't know what he's going to be like after that. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I think they could be answered with a Cody Garbrandt fight. But we can't forget about Cody maybe fighting Jose Aldo or TJ fighting Jose Aldo. I think Jose Aldo is just in the mix. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno's fight. Now, this is going to be the second fight. The last one ended in a draw. I think this is a perfect way to have a rematch. When it comes to a fight that was this close, and what I mean by that, and honestly, this one was a draw. So, I mean, it was close on the cards and everything. So we had to see a rematch. I don't really think there was much we could say. So I think this is the right fight. I think that this is going to be a fun fight. And honestly, Figueiredo is making this 125-pound division so interesting. When we saw DJ and we saw Henry Cejudo in this division, we didn't see a lot of knockouts. We saw a bunch of submissions, but this guy is just manhandling people at 125. And I'm talking about Figueiredo. But then we got this guy come in, Brandon Moreno, and he comes in there. Before that fight, he was fighting Brandon Rovel, who I had a lot of high hopes for, and defeated him with TKO punches. And then right after that fight, got the Figueiredo fight. So I think that this is making this 125-pound division a lot of fun. And I think that this is the right fight to make. Also, I don't want to forget about the point deductions that were given to Figueiredo. One point was taken away from him in the third round due to a blatant groin strike. So maybe we could say that obviously if he didn't get that point taken away from him, then Figueiredo would have won the fight. But now we got Brandon Moreno coming in with maybe a new plan and Figueiredo coming in with a new plan. But I just think that this is the right way to have a rematch. What do you think about this fight, Mas?
Yeah, these are definitely all the right moves. This division is very exciting right now, and I'm very interested in seeing, what these two bring to the table right now, and if they change anything from the first fight, because we know that it was very close. It was a draw, but on the scorecard as well, it was very, very, very close. And And this division's got a lot going on as well, right? Depending on who comes out victorious after this fight. Again, we got the Cody, we got Jose Aldo. A lot can go on right here, and this division is very, very exciting, especially with Figueiredo. He's a very exciting fighter. He's a hard hitter. And yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah, it's making the 125-pound weight class a lot of fun to watch. And, I just love the way that Figueiredo is fighting. And this is I'm not disrespecting or trying to be disrespectful to any of the other champions at 125. And I don't think Max is as well. This is just, Deiveson Figueiredo is going in there. He's cutting a lot of weight. He's big for that division. And he's just knocking people out and choking them out like crazy. And, the style that he has as well is amazing, coming in with those big sunglasses, and he's got that Kratos haircut with a big red line in his head. This guy's just a character. We just love it. So next thing I wanted to talk about was Max Holloway. I've talked about him a bunch on this podcast, and after his fight with Calvin Kattar, where he put on a performance which was one of the greatest of all time that we've seen. It was the first fight on ABC, so that was a big momentum for the UFC as well. And to have the first fight on the the ABC card was amazing. We saw Max Holloway go into that fight, and he was talking to Daniel Cormier, who was in the booth, and it was just an all-time great performance. Now, in a podcast that Max Holloway had with Ariel Helwani, he mentioned that he wanted to finish his career at 155. Now, he's got a lot of business to finish at 145 because a lot of people still regard him as the greatest 145-pound fighter. But ending his career off at 155, I think that is the move, and that's what's going to happen. Now, Max talked about in that interview with Ariel Helwani that he just has to stay at one weight class. He doesn't want to do this bouncing around. And what I mean by that is in the Dustin Poirier fight that he had, he lost that by unanimous decision, but Dustin Poirier was putting it on Max Holloway. And right after that fight, he took another fight with Frankie Edgar at 145. So he jumped back and forth. What Max is saying here is if I stay at 1225, that's a different Max Holloway. And he's also talked about Khabib Nurmagomedov and how a fight between him would be an amazing fight, and it might be the fight to make, and it might be the one that puts the O on Khabib Nurmagomedov's career. Max, what do you think about Max Holloway and his statements to Ariel Helwani?
Well, I feel like it all depends on how much he has left in the gas tank. Depending on that, I'd even say I'm looking at the division. Even we got a lot of exciting matchups that we can make, and I'm thinking about even Brian Ortega, another fight between those two. That's an option as well. Max Holloway, especially, looking at his last fight, Max Holloway and the legacy that he's built in the UFC is absolutely crazy. People, and this is an understatement as well, but people, relating Max Holloway, and there's been pictures of him right next to Muhammad Ali, and him dodging all those punches, moving around, slicking here and there. It's been pretty cool to witness, and I'm glad I've been here for that. Now, talking about specifically him calling out Khabib, I feel like at this point everyone's calling out Khabib. There's a lot of people that want that fight, right? You got Michael Chandler saying that, what, I respect that Khabib's gone and all. I respect him for that. I respect what he's done. But, if he was here, I would have been the one to put that, to take that O out of his record. At this point, again, I feel like Khabib's right now, people shouldn't consider him in the division. He's gone for now. And Max jumping to 155, that's pretty major as well. like you said, it's not easy jumping from division to division. There's a lot that goes into it. And I actually think that. Wait, do you exactly know what Max walks around at his weight?
Man, he has talked about fighting DC at heavyweight sometimes, and we all know that he likes his sweets. So, like, the guy's got to be walking around at 170 ish at least. I think in his last podcast that he did, and I'm talking about the Joe Rogan one, I think he might have mentioned 170. And that's the weight that he walks around at. I'm sure that he's got a weigh around a little bit less than Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier admitted that he walks around at 170. So, I mean, he fits right into that weight class. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we got to just admit that, hey, Khabib is gone and he's not coming back unless it's for something amazing. And I think that there's two ways that could have happened. And one of them was the GSP fight. I mentioned this in one of my previous podcasts. I feel like I'm saying that over and over again. But I talked about the GSP fight between Khabib and GSP, obviously. And I think that was one of the fights that he would have came back for. Now, I think that if Conor McGregor went and knocked out Dustin Poirier with an amazing performance, then we could have seen Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov too. Now, I think someone's got to impress him. Khabib has mentioned this a bunch of times now, but he says that the Michael Chandler fight didn't impress him. He says that the Dustin Poirier fight didn't impress him. He says that the Oliveira fight that he had with Tony Ferguson didn't impress him. So I think we just got to go by the letter of the law. And what I mean by that is whatever Khabib is saying, he's saying someone's got to impress him. I think we got to really stay true to that and see if anybody can impress him and if he would come back. And also, people are joking around about this, but they're like Khabib's mom and his family. I don't think it's just Khabib's mom, but his family have to be okay with it. His family have to be okay with the fact that he's going to go out there and fight without his father, who was such a major part of his training camps. But what do you think, Mass? Like, what do you think about this?
Good thing that you brought that up. Usually when you look at like family bonds and you analyze them, when someone says something like that, many people don't take it seriously. But with the loyalty and respect that Khabib Nurmagomedov, has for his family, and not only his family but his training partners, the people that he lives with, the people in his villages. Joe Rogan was even mentioning that Khabib still drives. He drives a Toyota pickup truck, wears normal clothes, and the point that I'm trying to make there is that Khabib is he's very original, and he's very, very, very family oriented. And it's just really cool to witness that he has to get his mom's approval, especially with the fact that his dad, his entire life, he's the one that brought him up. He's the one that coached him. And his dad no longer being here anymore, which is very sad. Again, with the respect and loyalty Khabib has for his family, I don't expect anything else. And this is very, it's just awesome to see the camaraderie that he has with his family, right? Usually you'd think that, if someone wants to fight, they'll go ahead and fight. But he has to get permission from his mother and his training partner and his brother. It's actually emotional as well, right? With his dad not being here. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not just the family, but you can also see it whenever like his cousin fights or one of his teammates fight. You see Khabib Nurmagomedov in the background. You see him as a coach. You see him like his father. His father was the coach of that whole team. Javier Mendez from AKA, he is the head coach, and he will be always Khabib Nurmagomedov's head coach. But when you have a father figure like that who grew the sport in Dagestan. Khabib Nurmagomedov's father grew it there. He trained these children from a young age, made them fight bears and all this kind of stuff. And for him to be gone is such a big impact on Khabib. Like Khabib was never emotional after a fight. And to see the emotions that he had after his win against Justin Gaethje was just, it shows you how much of a family unit that they are. So the last topic that I wanted to talk to you about was the big one. UFC 259 is coming next week. It's going to be a super packed card. We're going to see it on March the 6th. We're going to have Israel Adesanya fight John Blachowicz. We're going to have Amanda Nunes fight Megan Anderson. We're going to have Piotr Jan fighting Aljamain Sterling. And we have a bunch of fun fights on this card. Mass, let me know who you want to talk about first.
I mean, I think we should go ahead and talk about, the history that is going to be determined at 259. And, if Adesanya wins against Blachowicz, he'll become the fifth fighter in the history of the UFC to hold two titles simultaneously. And I think so. In order, we got the first ones that were who did the champ. It was Conor, DC, Nunes, and then Henry. So he'll be the fifth if this happens. And another mention of history: no one has won the 185 and the 205 title at the same time.
Yeah, I think it takes a fighter like Israel Adesanya to do something like this. I think his body is just made for this kind of jump in weight. He has fought in heavyweight in his kickboxing career. He has fought in this 205 range in his kickboxing career. So we've seen him do it in the past. We've seen him jump up in weight, but it just takes a special type of athlete and a special type of genetic makeup to make a jump like this, to be able to cut down to the weight class that he's at, and then to move to 205. And then eventually he says that he's going to move to heavyweight. You need a special type of body for that. And I bring this up so many times in so many of my podcasts. I feel like you guys are so annoyed at me saying this, but I think the time that we saw Israel Adesanya stand next to Brendan Schaub on his food truck diary, we saw how tall Adesanya was. And I remember even before that, Brendan Schaub, a lot of people were saying that there's no way that Adesanya could fight John Jones. He's way too big. And now we're seeing him fight Blachowicz, who's the 205 champion. It's just amazing to see. And how do you think this fight's going to play out?
Yeah, first of all, Adesanya, we know he's the type of fighter that wants challenges that others avoid, right? He's always talking about how muscles don't win fights and how he's, here to prove that wrong. And I feel like this is the perfect move, Blachowicz, he's one of the best in the world in this division. And, he's been shutting down all these guys at 205, and his entire career, he's been shutting down people. And he's got a lot of power. And, when he does connect, he connects big time. So I think the question is, how is Adesanya going to move at lightweight? I think he'll be very versatile and he'll be very agile like he always is. But, we can always make assumptions. But again, with Blachowicz's striking and his power, I'm just here to see whether he connects or not, and see what happens if he does connect.
Yeah, one of his nicknames is having the Polish power. And I think that's totally true in this fight. I think that we're going to see Blachowicz come into this fight. He's really going to try and stick and hit him with those power shots. We saw him do that in his last fight. I think Blachowicz is just going to go in there. And it's so funny with Blachowicz is that I think a lot of people count him out just because he has a slow, plodding style. which is not appealing to the masses, I guess. And a lot of people just count him out because he just throws those power shots. He throws everything he's got in every single shot that he throws. And I think that a lot of people think that this guy is set up for Adesanya to take out. Adesanya is just going to go in there and piece him up because we have seen him fight slow plotting fighters before, but Blachowicz is something different in my opinion. I'm not saying that he's going to win, but I'm just saying that we got to think about this guy in a different way. I think he has a lot of thoughts and he's processing so much in those quick seconds. He's reacting, he's doing all these things, but he's just doing it in his own way. The boxing that Blachowicz has is super underrated, and the knockout power, we all know of it, but I think we have short memories about his knockout power. Now, don't confuse this in saying that I think that Adesanya is getting smoked or anything like that. I just think that Adesanya is the most sophisticated striker in the UFC. I'm stealing Joe Rogan's line right there. But the IQ that he comes in with and his coach out there in New Zealand displays just something, it's just amazing. All the fakes and the counters that he throws is just incredible what Adesanya does and the way he calculates it. And then we saw the heart. I'm just going to switch topics here a little, but we saw the heart and determination that Adesanya had from the Kelvin Gastelum fight. In the Kelvin Gastelum fight, and we didn't see this in any of his other fights because he just smoked everybody. But in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, he literally walked out there and he said, "I'm ready to die for this." His face looked so beat up and he was bleeding all over the place. And we saw Adesanya's heart in that fight. I think this is going to be an amazing fight, and it's a perfect one to put on top of this stacked uh, card. Mash, let me know more what you think about this fight.
All in all, I agree with what you said, talking about how, Adesanya is, the sophisticated fighter that he is and his IQ. When you put someone like Adesanya in front of anyone, right, with Adesanya's history and what he has under his belt, I'm pretty sure, his opponents do get overwhelmed. And going back to his heart, listen, Adesanya's got a lot of heart. He's got all the perfect traits that a best fighter should have. And this is gonna be very exciting. He's got it all. He's got it all. And right now, he's one of the faces of the UFC.
So let me set up the co-main event here a little bit. So we got Amanda Nunes coming in. She's the double champ, and she's the greatest women's fighter of all time. She's knocked out a bunch of high class women fighters. She went in there and TKO'd Chris Cyborg, who was the boogeyman of the 145-pound division. So now we have Amanda Nunes coming in and fighting Megan Anderson, who a lot of people are saying is a true 145er. She's massive for the weight class. And let me know what you think about this, Mass. Like, how do you think Megan Anderson is going to do? What do you think? How do you think this fight is going to play out?
I think, first of all, great matchup stylistically. We got Amanda Nunes coming back in very motivated. And I think she's coming back for the first time ever since June, and she's coming back as a mother. So she's very motivated to come back. Now, talking about Megan Anderson, she's won her last two fights, and she's a former Invicta FC champion of the featherweight division. Now, stylistically, we know that Nunes is like more of an unorthodox fighter, and she's very well-rounded, a good striker, good on the ground. Her jiu-jitsu is awesome. She's fighting at 145. She doesn't need to cut as much weight. And now to play like devil's advocate, Megan Anderson, she's got a lot of power, and she's a very, very sophisticated striker. And, we can't discredit that either and just overlook her.
I think Megan Anderson, after the fight that she had with Holly Holmes, where Holly Holmes did the exact opposite of what we thought she was going to do. And what I mean by that is she went in there, Holly Holmes did, and she took Amanda Nunes, she took Megan Anderson down and showed her amazing jiu-jitsu. Now, I think what happened to Megan Anderson was that she showed the success, she showed a lot of disadvantages on the ground, if you will. And so I think that exposed her a little bit. Now, what I think Amanda Nunes will really focus in on her ground game. She will try and take down Megan Anderson and use her black belt jiu-jitsu that she has and really try and go after it, because the length and the reach that uh, Megan Anderson has, which is 72 inches to Amanda Nunes's 69 inches. I think she's really going to use that on the feet. I think that Megan Anderson shows a lot of striking, amazing striking capabilities, but I think that Amanda Nunes is really going to take advantage of the ground game when it comes to this fight. What do you think about that, Mass?
No, well said, well said. And again, I don't want to discredit anyone, specifically Megan Anderson. But look, Nunes, she has the most wins, finishes, and title fights among the women in the UFC. And I personally see a major, major gap between Nunes and the rest of the women in the 145 division. So I guess we just got to wait and find out for ourselves and figure out what happens.
Yeah, like I said, she's the greatest women's fighter of all time, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion. I don't even think that you could really go against that statement. Now, the next fight I wanted to talk about was the Petr Yan Aljamain Sterling fight. Let me know what you think about that one.
Again, good matchup again. Yan, one of the hardest hitting bantamweights of all time, and like one of the hardest. Like I can't emphasize that. Stylistically, again, he's very fun to watch, hard hitting, very versatile, smooth on the feet, and Sterling as well. He's very lethal, and we've seen that he's amazing all around.
Yeah, we've seen Sterling use his jiu-jitsu. He's from that Long Island crew where Chris Weidman trains and all these killers train. So we've seen Aljamain go in there and choke out Corey Sandhagen in the first round, and that was an amazing win for him. Corey Sandhagen, after that fight, it went on and knocked out a bunch of people, including Frankie Edgar. Petr Yan, I've always been high on him. The striking ability that he shows, and mixed with the wrestling that we've seen. And I'm going to bring this up again, but I think that even though Uriah Faber was over the hill, if you will, in the fight that he had with him, Uriah at the time was 40 years old. But the striking that Petr Yan showed was so advanced. And I don't want to compare it to Israel Adesanya's, but it's different in many ways. But the ins and outs that they use, the first moves that they use, which is a lot of feinting, and Petr Yan does something different to Adesanya, which is he shells up, goes in that peekaboo style like Mike Tyson, and then really rips it to the body and rips it to the head. But it shows you how sophisticated of a striker this guy is. Like Petr Yan is just something amazing. But will his wrestling be able to nullify Aljamain Sterling's takedowns and jiu-jitsu? We'll have to see about that. I think that this is a real grappler versus striker matchup. We've seen Petr Yan use his jiu-jitsu and wrestling before, but I think that, you know, Aljamain's going to go in there. He's talked about this in a bunch of interviews and podcasts that he's done. He's going to go in there and really do that Khabib style pressure against Petr Yan and try taking him down at every single corner of the fight. But I think Petr Yan's going to want to keep this on the feet and use his amazing striking and sophisticated striking to nullify that of Aljamain Sterling. Any other thoughts on this fight, Mass?
You rounded it up pretty well. Again, Jan's striking pedigree is top level, but we just gotta figure out and find out what he like. Does he have any answers for Sterling's wrestling and ground game?
Yeah, for sure. Any other? Do you want to pick out some fights off of this card that you just want to quickly touch on?
I'm looking at it right now. We got the lightweight bout as well, Islam versus Dober. That's going to be a very interesting one as well. We know that Islam's wrestling pedigree is top level. Listen, he's Khabib's cousin, right? Amazing grappling. He's a great submission artist as well. And Dober, on the other hand, he's very fast on his feet, and he jumps in with big power, jumps in and out, and throws some big shots. I think with this, the only issue Islam faces, in my opinion, is the fact that Dober has a very unorthodox approach. And we know that Islam, he has a pretty solid chin. And I think he's only been finished once. Correct me if I'm wrong on
that. So yeah, I'm gonna have to double check that, but yeah, we all know that Islam Makhachev has amazing wrestling, and Drew Dober is gonna really test that. We've seen Islam Makhachev before, and that's totally gonna be a fun fight. I mean, that lightweight division is is crazy, and then we see all these new guys coming in, and it's number 14 versus number 15, so it's very close. It's going to be very close in competition. Some of the other fights I wanted to point out. So Thiago Santos is coming back, and he's facing Rakic. Rakic is someone that I've been highly into, and his amazing fighting style. We all know Thiago Santos to come in there and throw the hammers and knock people out all the time. His wife just fought recently, and we saw him there, and so we know that he's been in the game for a little while now. We also have Dominic Cruz and Casey Kenny headlining the prelim card. Now that's going to be a fun fight, and it's going to show us where Dominic Cruz is at in his career. He says that he doesn't believe in ring rust, but now he's getting to the point where he's getting older in age, and he's 35 years old. Funny enough, he's the exact same age as TJ Dillashaw. So those guys are getting in their advanced age. And for some reason, I just felt like Dominic Cruz was a lot older than he said he was. His last fight was against Henry Cejudo, which he lost, which rounded out Henry Cejudo's like amazing fights that he's won. He lost to Cody Garbrandt, which was in 2016. And that was an amazing display where Cody Garbrandt got the belt and did all these crazy moves on Dominic Cruz. Before that, we saw Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber go at it, and he defeated Uriah Faber in 2016. So this guy's had somewhat of a scattered career, and what I mean by that is he hasn't been able to fight that often. Casey Kenny, we all know him as he's a great fighter, and I think he's really going to test Dominic Cruz in this sense, where we're really going to find out where Dominic Cruz is at in this in the older stages of his career. Now, the next fight I wanted to talk about was the Joseph Benavidez fight. Joseph Benavidez is coming back after the devastating loss that he took against Figueiredo. In that fight, it was sad to see because everybody felt like Benavidez was the guy that was going to come back and join this 125-pound division and was going to take it over after DJ left and after Henry Cejudo left. But then we saw him face Figueiredo once, which was which they had to have a rematch for because Figueiredo didn't make the weight. Like we mentioned before, Figueiredo is like massive for this 125-pound division. So in the first fight, he got knocked out by Figueiredo in the second round. Then he got submitted in the first round. So it's gonna be very interesting to see this guy come back. Joseph Benavidez is a real staple in that 125-pound division. Um, and aside from that, I think that covers all the. Oh yeah, Tim Elliott is fighting on the early prelims. We always love seeing Tim Elliott fight. He's a fun fighter, and having him on the early prelims is just a treat on its own. Having him so early in the card. So I think those are the main fights that I wanted to talk about. Mas, do you have anything else you wanted to mention about UFC 259?
No, all in all, I think we capped everything up pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. Quickly going back to Benavidez, I think his last fight with Figueiredo was sad seeing him go out. Right, it was very sad. We obviously didn't expect that, but I'm here to see how he comes back, and if he comes back stronger and motivated and better.
Yeah, I mean, Benavidez, like I said, the high hopes and expectations that were on him, it was just pretty crazy to see. And he had that first fight with Figueiredo, and we were like, okay, he got knocked out because of the weight issues and how much bigger Figueiredo is, and he wasn't able to get down to the 125-pound limit. So there was kind of a built-in excuse when it comes to that fight. But yeah, super excited for all these fights. This is such a massive card. I know we're going to be talking about it more this week. So, subscribe and all that kind of good stuff so you can keep on listening to it. Mas, I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to me and talking about some fights. I know we always talk about fights, but it's great to record it and upload it and have all the fans and everybody listen to it. So that was really fun. Really appreciate you taking the time in your day and listening to this podcast. If you guys could like, subscribe, hit the bell notification on YouTube, that'd be really appreciated. If you guys could listen to the podcast on the different podcast platforms, that'd be great. And also, if you could give a follow and 5 stars, that'd be amazing. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. Bye.